Welcome to the Exodus Companies podcast. My name is Jared. I'm the founder and CEO of the Exodus Companies. This is a movement from culture to build community. Today, guys, we have a podcast episode where we brought Brenton back on the show.
What's
so,
up?
Brenton, say hello to the followers and listeners.
What is going on?
So, Brenton, for people that may not know exactly what you do, give
Yes.
them the 30,000 foot view of what your day-to-day looks like. And remember, be nice or else on your next one-on-one, we're going to be talking
I'm going to get
about
penalized for that. No, essentially I do most of the media creation. I wouldn't say all, but I do most of the media creation and do all the social media stuff. Trying to think what else I do. There's a lot sometimes.
it.
Trying
Yeah,
to think.
it's a hectic existence,
Yeah, but it's fun.
I think. So, yeah, you pretty much, for anybody who doesn't know much about social media, so there's the planning phases, there's the actual gathering of the content phases, there's the editing of the content, and then the posting. And I would probably, well, I want to know your answer.
Mhm.
Which one is the most time consuming?
Oh, definitely the editing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as we're going to get into later in this video, there's a lot of time spent in editing.
Yeah.
So,
And the objective of this particular podcast, I wanted to get Brenton and I together because this last year we released probably one of the coolest edits.
oh, I would say easily. And easily the most time consuming and most planned out, I would say,
Yeah,
edits we've ever done.
for sure. For anybody not knowing exactly what we're talking about, we launched officially the Exodus Companies. Obviously, you're paying attention to our podcast right now. You're listening to our podcast right now. But this has been a buildup over the last year plus. And at one of our recent team meetings, I talked a little bit about the timeline.
Yeah.
And it was pretty crazy to think
Yeah.
about it because that goes all the way back to September of 2021.
And even I forgot about how it even started and how
Yeah.
far we started the process.
Yeah, because we went into this crazy cyclone. That's what I feel like this last year was. It was just a crazy cyclone of just trying to get this thing launched. So September 2021, obviously, we're talking about the Exodus Companies. It's kind of the foundational elements of it. As we got through the end of the year, I remember the Christmas dinner we had with the team.
Yeah.
Talked a little bit about, hey guys, here's where we're headed, and just gave them the bird's eye view of what we're doing. And you obviously had known a little bit more about that
Yeah.
before anybody else on the team because you're in the media team, and that was important that you were filled in on that. But it kicked off one of the most complicated years that we have ever had. So
Yeah.
I want to hear it from your lens, and I want you to describe to everybody listening, what was the objective last year? And then give a little bit, some of the details.
As far as the objective for what we were doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. 2022. What was
Yeah.
2022?
Yeah. So essentially that was like the building of basically like how we launch the companies, how we go about even just like making the products we make. And so we spent, I would say, the first quarter, maybe most of the second quarter, just doing websites, planning content. And we honestly kind of left, we still did a lot of stuff with TA, but we kind of left that on the back burner while we worked on the Exodus Companies.
Yeah,
But-
that was probably one of the hardest balances, I think.
Yeah.
Was like, hey, we have these brands that exist.
Yeah.
And obviously we need to maintain what we're doing. We can't just turn off a switch and be like, okay, we'll get to TA later, which is honestly the irony of it is it's kind of what we did.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, we looked back, I remember talking about it at the end of last year and just thinking, man, we went like 4 months without posting hardly anything to the TA YouTube. And up until that point, 2021, there were many weeks we were posting 2 videos. Crazy.
Yeah. We went from posting like, I don't know, up to even, I would say like 10 times a month sometimes to like maybe once. And it was kind of crazy from RC because we were trying to like get all this content out in 2021. And then all of a sudden we're working on other stuff on the side.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
And from your lens, do you think, from what we talked about from the planning phase,
Mhm.
you know, I think both of us, it's fair to say, probably had some preconceived notions of what we thought launching the brands would be. Did that change the reality?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It definitely took a lot longer than we thought too. Because there's a lot of stuff that we didn't even really put into consideration
Yeah.
when starting out that process.
Yeah, and the recent podcast that we just talked about, I just shot, I should say, and edited, I talk about that a lot, how you create a plan and then your plan all of a sudden veers off course. And there's often nothing you can do because you're operating in an unknown area.
Mm-hmm.
And so naturally things that you haven't planned for come up. And I think one of the strengths of our team is pivoting, being able to pivot quickly. Sometimes we do get into analysis paralysis, which we talk about.
Yeah, we talk about that.
But I think we do have a strength though that, when push comes to shove and we're like, hey, we're in a corner, we need to move, we end up moving.
Yeah.
But it was a complicated year.
Yeah.
Fair enough to say.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
So this video launch, what I want to do is explain to everybody kind of what this video means, because it's such a huge pivotal edit. And then I also want to, for everybody listening, give some inside information as to what it looks like to film something like that. And I know that that's a lot to jump into.
Yeah.
And it's complicated. So I think what I'd like to do is start with the planning phase.
Mm-hmm.
And I know this is an interesting part for me, and I'm curious to hear your take on it. But give us a rundown kind of what it looks like to plan a video like this.
I think it's a lot of like making plans and just trashing them, at least for this video. Because we both went into it like not really sure what to do.
Yeah.
And it kind of took us a while to get to that point where we could formulate an actual plan. Because obviously we didn't want to use this video to launch the companies and have it just be some corny, like non-story, just, hey, this is our company. And so it took us a little bit to get to that point where we actually had a solid story to create, essentially.
And at the beginning, you had kind of laid out a packet.
Yeah.
So how much time do you think you put into that packet?
Oh man, I don't even know. That was a few weeks of work. I mean, obviously not all at once, but it was probably a good 30, 40 hours maybe.
Yeah.
Or actually probably more than that, honestly. I don't even remember that. That was a long time ago. But yeah, it was what? Some like 40 pages of shot lists.
Intense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember, for anybody wondering, it was about that thick.
Yeah, it was.
It was about an inch thick of papers, and it was a good plan to start. And I think it did help us with the organizational aspect.
Yeah.
But the reality is, kind of going back to that point, that pivoting in the moment happened a lot.
Yeah, because it did change over time.
But the thing that I don't even remember that I was trying to wrap my head around is, like, when did we land on the final plan?
See, I was trying to think about that the other day. I have no clue when we actually got to that point. Because I know we planned out the first portion, if you guys don't know, that's the Exodus portion of the video. It's like a good 2.5 minutes of this guy, which would be Jared, sitting in front of a TV watching like the current events happening. And that was kind of like the original idea. And that one was, I would say, probably the most planned out. That was a shot per shot plan, essentially. That was I remember filming that those 2 nights.
Yeah. Well, you filmed it 2 nights because you weren't happy with the first night.
Well, yeah, I wasn't happy with the first one, so I had to retake some stuff. But yeah. Yeah,
that first, I think that first sequence you had a pretty clear vision of. And I think we had a pretty clear vision of. I think after we got beyond the Exodus company story, that's when it started to get kind of complex.
Yeah.
Where we started to try to figure out, okay, we know we want to create these brands. We know we want to have a purpose behind what we do. We don't want it to just be, these companies that make photos and do videos and stuff. So how do you capture somebody's mind in that video? And, you kind of alluded to this. We didn't want it to just be some video that people watched and really had no purpose, which is sort of funny because that's what we did the first Site B.
Yeah.
I think you would agree. We were talking about that the other
day. It was
day.
basically like showing off cinematics.
Yeah.
And people loved it. They did.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm proud of that video.
Yeah. Oh, me too. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny because I remember being so stressed out.
Yeah.
From the first Site B.
Yeah.
I remember
that.
us running around like goofballs, just trying to get shots and make stuff happen and make a story out of something. And what kind of came out of that was a cool video, flashy, lots of machine guns and shooting and night vision. And I think it served a purpose.
Yeah.
For me, it kind of lit a fire where I'm sitting here thinking, wow, I really see storytelling being a part of what we do going forward.
Mm-hmm.
I see that as a major box that we checked off. We matured into a new era of content because really prior to that, we weren't really doing any storytelling.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think from that video, that was also a good learning experience, especially for me. Like I was at that point, oh man, I was doing video production for maybe like a few months at that point. And it also helped me learn to really plan stuff out. And that I think that was our biggest struggle with the first videos. We kind of came in and we were just like, oh, what do we do? And we were here already. So, but
So first Site B ever.
yeah.
Didn't even have the range set up. Had to get the excavator, had to move everything.
That's right. Yeah.
Had to even determine what the video was. It was very chaotic.
Yeah.
We didn't have all of the time code stuff with cameras figured out. We didn't have
right.
all.
That was a
It
mess.
was just such a mess.
Yeah.
So, okay, before we dive into the Exodus launch video any deeper, do you think we learned something between the first Site B video edit and the second?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I think, like I said, the planning for sure. I'm trying to think what else. I think we learned how to storytell a little bit better. And personally for me too, because I don't really have a background in that. And just being able to tell a story. And I think this video, even from this video, we learned a lot of what we need to do next time.
I think that's important to note because it's easy to look at the things that you do in the moment.
Yeah.
Be unhappy with them and decide, I don't know, man, I kind of suck at this.
Yeah.
But the reality is you have to make a decision in that moment that, hey, maybe it's not the best I'm ever going to do, but I still have to continue doing it or else I'm never going to learn the skills that I need to be able to go to the next level. And it's like when I sit back and I think about the next 15, 20 years of Exodus companies, I would love to have full movies.
Yeah.
I just think that would be so cool to have the ability to really capture our culture in a way that no other company is going to. So where do you start with that? Well, you have to start at zero and doing videos like this. We have to learn how to storytell. We need to learn how to plan. I mean, right now, there's usually only ever 3 to 4 people involved in our filming. And, people helping with lights and, you filming and usually me on camera or behind the scenes or somebody else on camera or Ethan or one of the other team members. It's not really that many people, but what happens when it's 8 people, 10 people, 12 people involved in a shoot?
And it's good and bad because it could be very chaotic as well. Like if you don't have specific goals or specific job roles, I should say, it would just be complete chaos.
Yeah. So these are things that as we continue, you learn and then you apply those skills. But I am proud of what we did for the Exodus Company's video. So talking about this video, let's go through the timeline a little bit. I would say, I forget the exact date. It was around, April maybe?
When we started
When
playing?
we first filmed that in what we called the gutter shed at the shop.
Yeah, it was like late April or May.
And then what's funny though is about 2 months went by between the first night that we filmed and then the reshoot.
Yeah.
So when you guys are watching the beginning portion, the first couple minutes of the Exodus launch video, where I'm sitting in the shop and I'm watching the TV, it's kind of crazy that there was at least a month. I might be wrong with 2 months, but it was at least a month between the first time we shot that and the second round of shots we got. I had to remember what glasses I wore, my hat, my shirt, my jeans.
You got
my
a
shoes.
haircut again?
Yeah, I had to get a haircut again because I wanted everything to match. And I think it worked out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Honestly, I don't even remember which nights were which watching that video back.
Yeah.
But
and that's pretty cool. So give everybody kind of a rundown of the purpose of the first section of the video there.
Yeah, so the first section is kind of to show this guy, and it can be anybody. Obviously, Jared was the one playing it out, but just this guy who is kind of like in the day-to-day life, just kind of focused on whatever else is happening in the world and just almost in a way being manipulated by what's going on. And the significance of him leaving is basically him going out into the real world and doing what he needs to do. And that's kind of the rest of the video. But the beginning is kind of setting the scene as of like a man just kind of, just going along with the motions, I would say.
Yeah, and the cool part about this whole video, and one thing I want you to keep in mind, guys, after you listen to this podcast and you go and you watch this video, I want you to watch it with an open mind, because the objective of this video was not for us to necessarily box everybody into the same interpretation.
Yeah.
I know that everybody always says art is up for interpretation, it's in the eye of the beholder, and it can be kind of corny when people say that.
Yeah.
But the reality is, it is the truth. People interpret things in a different way than other people. And what I wanted people to see in that moment, though, was that tension, that removal from that current situation, whatever that might be in their life, and then taking a physical step. But the irony is, throughout the video, as you come to find, I hadn't taken that physical step. It was almost like I was operating within this metaphorical, like I knew what I needed to do, but I didn't do it until at the end, where there was a pretty pivotal moment at the end there. and we won't talk about that until the very end, but it's one of those extremely up for interpretation for every single individual. And I think that we did a good job with that.
Yeah.
And we got good feedback based on that. Now it's up to you guys to tell us whether or not they agree with that or not.
Yeah, what you guys think.
So going from the first part of the video into the second where we're up at Site B, what did the planning look like? We talked about a little bit of how we had sort of a solid plan going into the first section of the video. Compare that to the second.
Yeah, so the second one was a bit interesting because we went in, I would say, with a plan. It wasn't as detailed as the first section for obvious reasons. We didn't need the shot by shot sort of thing with the TV. But we went in with, I would say, the story, but we kind of left the shots open. And I would say it worked out. In the moment, we were kind of going back to the whole thing. We were kind of stressed out a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what you think. Is that?
Yeah, I think it was a blur.
Yeah, it was.
So that was the third time we were up at Site B, right? That was Site B3.
Yep.
So
that was the first time in almost a year, I think, or 9 months or something like that.
Yeah, for sure.
So we had to kind of fix up some things on the range, I believe. But
yeah, so the range is obviously established, but we still had to do a lot of maintenance and things like that. But it was hectic.
Yeah.
Like I barely remember filming. I remember the TA filming part. I don't remember as much discussion in the moment. Now maybe you do.
Yeah, I would actually agree with that.
Yeah, I feel like, not that we winged it, but I feel like there was a piece of us that just said, hey, look, we know that we need to get certain shots. Let's get those shots, some artistic things. Because the TA section, if you watch it in the video, it's telling a story, but at the same time, that story is easier to tell in various shots that aren't necessarily like, whether I was shooting a certain cardboard target or a certain drill or whatever it was, it didn't necessarily matter quite as much as the beginning, but it was a blur.
Yeah.
And I was thinking back to even the drone shots of driving the Jeep. I don't even know if I remember that.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah. I don't even remember when we took that, but
So if there's a lesson to be learned here, guys, it's that sometimes in the chaos of growth and momentum, you forget completely what you were even doing.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I think sometimes people think it's also more complicated than it is. Now, it is very complicated. I'm not going to say it's not. But people think that like sometimes these videos that they watch are very structured. And some of them are. But it's also sometimes it's like there's a lot of that like behind the scenes going on where it's like there's a game plan, but you still have to figure some small details out.
Yeah. And sometimes those details come as you go.
Yeah.
I remember discussing the whole scene where Ethan had the radio, and I remember, talking about, I need to have this shot where I just say to him, headed your way.
Yeah.
And we shot them at vastly different times.
I think it was days apart almost.
It was a couple days.
Yeah.
We shot my part, I think, first. I don't even remember.
Yeah.
But then I remember Ethan like looking at us weird, and we're like, hey, you have to say this thing. Just say this and trust us. Hey, Keystone, there's movement up at Site B.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I just remember him being like, what? It's like, just trust us. And I think that, that's something that's interesting to me about content creation, is the fact that you can shoot things out of order.
Yeah.
Now,
and you almost have to sometimes, depending on what the weather's like. I know if like for reshoots, you have to essentially wait until you get that chance.
I think there's value in trying to nail it all down, but I think sometimes one area of growth that we could have when we're doing these larger edits is being more flexible with what we shoot and when.
Yeah.
I find myself trying to lock us into, we need to get the TA section. We have to get that TA section today. We can't reshoot that tomorrow because the lighting will be different. Or what if I wear different glasses, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It gets chaotic. So going into the arcane portion, coming out of TA, the main premise of the TA one was, hey, there's a guy who is training. There's somebody who is saying the world is full of different challenges, and it's our responsibility to take that initiative to initiate that training. And the voiceover, you hear him talking about that. It's our responsibility to own our freedom. It's our responsibility to stand up for our freedom and to be responsible citizens by being equipped and trained. And if we want to protect our faith, we want to protect our culture, and all the values that we hold, we have to have the ability to fight for them.
Yeah.
And as we got into the arcane portion of the video, that is probably my favorite portion.
Oh,
And it also was easily one of the sections that I don't know if least confident is the right word, but there was a lot of unknown because we were using the R6 inside with Leo's part.
Yeah, Leo's part.
So what was your take on that? Like, as we walked into this cabin, which now we're here at the lodge, it's finished, it's furnished, it's nice. We're actually staying here for the first time. This was all just studs and loose wires and stuff. What was your thought when we got up here and we're like, hey, we're going to film inside the lodge? And then we walk in and it's like, whoa.
Yeah, I would say that was definitely one of the probably more chaotic times because we shot that section of the video, I think it was like 2 or 3 different nights. Yeah. This was one section. We shot this one night and then we shot stuff down at the creek. But yeah, I would say it was pretty chaotic.
Yeah. And looking back, would you have changed anything?
I don't know. I think one of the things, again, I always go back to this, but is coming in with a better plan. I think that was like one of the nights that was just everything was happening. There's some small inconveniences that we didn't really think about, but there's also, I wasn't really sure in my head how to transition the different like segments of the video.
Yeah.
So
we also physically had never laid eyes on this building inside.
Yeah, because we had no clue what we were coming up to.
Yeah. Sort of reminded me of the first Site B,
yeah,
where we came up and Ethan and Kirby were like, "Hey, there's this cool spot, you could use it."
Yeah.
And the lodge, like, we'd seen pictures of it, but up until that point, we hadn't really stepped foot inside of it. So, all we knew was, hey, there's a structure here and we can probably use it. But then fitting that into the story in a way that made sense was extremely difficult.
Yeah.
And it was very challenging. When you're looking at the video, you can't just come into a dark room, a dark building and film. It just doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
So we had to figure out lighting. We had lights on the porches. We had lights inside.
I think we spent quite a few hours just trying to figure that out. And there was still some stuff looking back that I would have changed for sure. But.
Yeah. And, looking at the lights, you guys take it for granted. Maybe I take it for granted. I know this for sure. In movies, different colors of lights to replicate moonlight and trying to make it seem like it's realistic and cast shadows. And also, like, as we're moving through the rooms, that the shadows are coming from the same direction. Very complex.
Yeah.
Very complex.
It was.
So what would you say your largest takeaway was from the night that we filmed inside the lodge?
I think I probably would have spent more time on lighting, like you said, because we had some, I wouldn't say camera issues, but there's some stuff we were still learning with that infrared converted camera.
Yeah.
So the lighting wasn't the best for that. So I would say that's my biggest takeaway. I would say that we got what we needed for sure, and we got more than we needed. And that was on me. But I remember that night, I think it was you. You're like, oh, we probably have enough. I was like, oh, no, we don't have enough.
Now let's spend 4 more hours. We got to spend at least 4 more hours. And
yeah. And then it turns out when we got back, I was like, yeah, you were right. We didn't need all that.
It's like whenever we're on the range and we're filming anything, and I feel like there's even an inkling of me not having enough, I just run 10 more drills.
Yeah.
Just like, let's burn some ammo down.
Yeah.
Let's just dump another
We'll put
G60.
this somewhere.
Yeah, we'll put it somewhere. It'll work somewhere. Oh my gosh, that's like the worst thing to ever say is, oh yeah, we'll fit that in somewhere.
Yeah, and then you get to the edit and like, oh, where do I put this? Like,
yeah, like, I wasn't even focused.
Yeah.
So looking at it from my lens, when I think about that portion of the video, that was the transition from the range, the preparation to, hey, there's actually a threat inside of the world around us.
Yeah.
And that was what Leo was representing. Obviously we showed a little bit of a break-in kind of scene. It wasn't even really a break-in. It was just something wasn't right. You could tell from the music, the lighting, you could see him sneaking around through the house. You knew that something wasn't right. And the objective of that portion of the video wasn't for us to catch up with the danger.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't for us to save the day necessarily. So again, up for interpretation for each individual. And I know that some people were asking us, why didn't you catch up to him?
Yeah.
And we wanted to leave that story to be kind of untold.
Mm-hmm.
And, if I would have changed anything, maybe I would have changed a little bit of how we kind of showed that toward the end of that video. But largely what I wanted people to see through that was that you can train and that's cool. But at some point, we need to have some teeth. We need to have a spine. We need to be willing to take that training and then apply that into the world around us.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean we go out with our guns and stuff and go hunting for things or what, I mean, go hunting,
Yeah.
but you know what I'm saying? Not
Yeah.
hunting for trouble.
Yeah.
We're not looking to try to find trouble in our world, but we do need to recognize that trouble and evil exists within our world. And if we want to preach a good and healthy culture, we have to have the tools and the capabilities to be able to protect and defend that. So the TA section, the Arcane section, which is the brand that we haven't even mentioned in this podcast episode yet, but the Arcane section, that's where you take those two things together and you say, this is the holistic application of these skills. But also the cool thing is that's when Ethan and I came together.
Mhm.
And so the symbolic aspect of that is, hey, there's a lot of people out there that like to kind of beat their chest and say, hey, I'm the guy that's got all this stuff prepared and I'm that like lone wolf.
Yeah.
We romanticize this idea that, you know, we're going to be a lone wolf and we're just going to stand up to evil and fight it. But what we're trying to prove is that in order for culture to succeed and thrive, there has to be a community. It doesn't have to be this massive community. It can be one or two people, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But they're relying on each other instead of just solo flying, you know,
Yeah.
on your own.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of cool that like the video was about one person, but in each of the different sections there was at least some aspect of like, hey, you really can't do this alone,
Right.
in some way.
And on top of that, culture kind of boxes you away from that community building.
Yeah.
So if you look at the whole foundational aspect of why we're even doing this podcast, why we started these companies, it's the fact that culture wants you glued to that TV, you know, metaphor of TV,
Yeah.
not literally a TV,
Your
but
TikTok,
whatever, whatever media, whatever kind of consumption you're making,
Yeah.
they want you glued to that.
Yeah.
Because when you're separated from your community, you can be targeted, you're weaker, you're less likely to stand up for your ethics and your morality and your values. And so what we're trying to do is dismantle that narrative altogether. And I think that that was probably the most powerful aspect of this entire video.
Yeah, I
Like
would
you said,
agree.
There is always an aspect of community. And in fact, the darkest parts of this video are when I'm alone.
That's true.
And-
That's,
And that's it. It's
Yeah.
it's like a neat aspect of this entire edit is like, hey guys, you are alone. And when you are alone, there's some darkness there.
Yeah.
You know, the purpose of your life is not to be alone trying to fight your way through the world. So
yeah, and also like when it comes to a real life application, when you're lonely, you're more susceptible to being manipulated.
Mhm.
And I think that showed well, especially at the end of the video, like how susceptible you are to manipulation.
yeah. The end of the video makes my hair stand up. a
Oh
little
yeah,
bit.
my heart actually races during that section all the
Cringe,
time.
so cringy.
Yeah.
So cringy.
Yeah,
So we came out of Arcane and, you know, we have the teeth and it sort of totally changes tone.
yeah. That was one of, I would say, like the sections where it was like an immediate kind of shift in tone, and it was kind of cool to show that you can like kind of go from that. I don't know how to say this, but from that like dark place to like all of a sudden you're out there
Yeah.
doing your thing.
Yeah. I like to think of it almost as like a mental decision, like a mental pivot point.
Yeah.
Where you have decided that you're no longer just going to exist inside of that darkness. You have somewhat of a community you're building, but now what's the next step? What's the next thing that humanity is hungry for? And I think that tying that directly into Exo Overland
Yeah.
was a solid move.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Just for everybody listening, Exo Overland is a brand that we haven't officially even launched yet.
Mhm.
And that is coming. And that's a huge checkbox for us. You have probably listened to our podcast episode. Actually, the first time that Brent and I sat down and recorded was talking about the main trip.
Yeah.
So we're not going to go as in depth for this, but I want to talk about the planning aspect of this and what the objective was for that section of the video. So give us the rundown of what that looked like, you know, going to Maine.
Yeah, that
filming.
planning. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would say that the reason that we wanted this portion of the video essentially is to tie together that like, hey, you need to be prepared and you need to be self-reliant, and also going back to that community aspect, you need to do that with other people. And that's perfect for Exo Overland. And so I think I don't know when it was. It was end of summer. My dad and I wanted to go to Maine because we looked like it was a cool place. So we kind of planned that out. And as Jared said, we kind of had a whole podcast on this. But we spent, I don't know, 3 or 4 days up there and filmed most of the video. And actually what you see is a tiny portion of what we even filmed.
And from a planning standpoint, I would say that you had the most amount of planning in that portion of the video from a schedule standpoint.
Yeah.
But from a filming standpoint,
it was very relaxed.
It was very relaxed.
Yeah.
It wasn't as structured.
Yeah.
And I know that there was a little bit of back and forth between you and me where we were debating on whether or not that would complete the story. You know, that would tell a story. Remember when you were first laying out the B-roll, you're kind of like, it's kind of dry. It's
I felt it was very dry because I felt like it was just a whole bunch of clips. So like, oh, hey, Brenton and Jared went out to Maine. That's all I felt it was like. I feel like that was really tied together then with the voiceover.
Yes.
That really tied everything together.
Well, I remember specifically, you had me over in your office review. We were looking at kind of how far you had gone, and you had pretty much, I think, all of the timeline for that laid out.
I think so.
But there was that section where we were kind of out. I guess the first time it showed darkness, we were setting up the firebox, I think, in the tents and things like that. And it kind of shifted to some ASMR and it got quiet. And I remember us talking about, hey, let's bring this kind of song in and swell it in here. And then it like created, like what you took from that was you created this like impact moment.
Yeah.
And
honestly, I would say that's thanks to Josh. He's actually, what would you say? Our IT guy? Not our IT guy. Well, what's
he is our systems and technology manager.
He's basically our tech genius.
Yeah, so tech genius is a good way to put it.
So he actually created the whole voiceover for the whole thing, and that was his idea to put in that section, that voiceover. And I think that's honestly what did it for that impact moment. It
locked it in because here's the coolest part of this video. Like that's the part every time where I just get goosebumps.
Oh yeah,
thinking about it because the scene just goes to black.
Yeah,
and then it tells you that in your soul you know the answer. But it's just this powerful moment where it just gets quiet. But then it comes and just punches you in the face. And it's a lot of beauty. It's like the physical world. It's the areas around us that we take for granted. But it shifts your focus in that split second where you're like consumed. You're starting to do your thing. You're starting to build your community. But then you're called to nature. And all of the basic foundations of who you are just like punch you in the face.
Yeah.
And I think that just solidified the entire video through that portion.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that.
And I think that other people are going to interpret that obviously differently, like we've talked about. And I think it's going to hit each person in a little bit of a different way. But I think that it really takes that community-driven aspect and the drive to nature and the call to nature, and it puts it into, I guess, a tangible object, something people can understand and touch.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of people that don't necessarily think that they're called to nature. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We live in a bubble environment that says, hey, creature comforts are the way to go. We live in houses that are heated and cooled, and we go to the same job every single day. We do the same systems and functions, and we just create these cycles for ourselves, and then we long for things.
And at the end of the day, like you're comfortable where you're at, like especially like when I think of Overland, it's not like probably the most comfortable experience, but that's what makes it like enjoyable. Yeah. And like a lot of people, like, I mean, I think we all fall into it. We get comfortable with what we're doing to our day to day, and we don't really want to, deal with that. And that's
And the other aspect of it, and you just touched on this a little bit, is the fact that in our quote unquote industry where we typically are with TA targets, often people think of the preparedness as like a firearm or a skill set, being able to fight, but at the same time, being able to travel anywhere at a moment's notice. Snap your fingers and you can go 2,000 miles away and have a little home strapped to the roof of your vehicle, and food and a way to cook and tools. And like to know that you can go anywhere is a skill set that I think our culture is actually craving. And I don't think that everybody's necessarily aware of that. Again, because of the fact that we are comfortable in what we are as a society. But that longing and that desire to go back to nature still exists.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a calling that most people are ignoring.
Yeah. Oh, I'd 100% agree.
So looking back at the Exodus Overland portion, what would you have done differently at this point? Looking at it from a planning or a filming standpoint, or were you happy with the whole thing?
I mean, I was pretty happy with it only because there really was no planning. So I didn't really have a good basis to go off of because it's not like we failed in the planning aspect because we didn't really have a plan.
Yeah.
But I would say next time if we filmed something like that, I probably would go in with an actual plan. Even though at the end of the day you do get, I don't know, hours on hours of footage. But,
yeah, literally.
But yeah.
It's like 6 days of footage.
Yeah, it is.
It's an overwhelming amount of footage.
Yeah.
I don't remember how many cards we filled up, but it was absurd.
A lot. Yeah. And I think it kind of surprised us because we were like, we're out here like we just were going pretty much to just kind of get out of, I don't know how to explain it, but get out of where we're at. And so, yeah.
And the other aspect in that video, this was the first time that we introduced a younger generation.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We had Colin with us. Again, listen to that other podcast if you want to hear a full rundown of the Maine trip and what that consisted of, what that looked like from a logistical standpoint. But when we look at our culture and we say, hey, we want to change this culture, people forget about kids.
Mm-hmm.
I think selfishly in a lot of ways, our culture now looks at children as a burden.
Yeah.
I think that, not even I mean, I know that on average, people are having like less than 2 kids per household.
And now there's all these articles out pushing why you shouldn't have kids. So it's like people are feeding into this. They're like, oh, I guess that makes sense,
And then you add into the fact that society is also pressuring people to just work and, rather than start a family young, push it off until you're older. And we're like creating this void where a generation isn't even existing. But when we want to build a healthy culture, we want to invest in the culture around us and have maximum impact. What more impact can you have by raising the next generation?
Yeah.
And we wanted to include that inside of this video because of the importance of it. And that was a difficult decision for me because I have 4 kids.
Yeah.
Naturally, several of them wanted to come along on the trip, but originally I offered the invitation to Bennett, my oldest. And Bennett he's a protector, but he's more of like mommy's protector. He wants to stay home and protect my wife. And so he naturally didn't really want to come with. So I offered it over to Colin, and Colin was 4 at the time. And to take a little 4-year-old, 1,400 miles away or whatever it was for 6 days or so was crazy.
Yeah. And you said that he still talks about that
every day,
like all the time. Yeah. That's
every
so
day.
Cool. Cause I know at first I was like, wonder how this is going to go. Like it's a 4-year-old, you're going out in the middle of nowhere. And it was great. It was so much fun. But
yeah. And the part to me, I said it in the Maine podcast, it still stands out to me. When I talk to him about Maine, when he's having an attitude issue or he's having a meltdown or totally disobeying, I learned something about him. And again, apply this to culture, guys, as you're listening to this. Analyze your situations, the people around you. Learn the people around you. We forget that. We forget that the relationships that we have to be investing time into who those people are. So I learned something about Colin, and he has this desire to be a man. And society, again, takes young men and they want to emasculate them, and they want to say, your traits as a man are actually toxic. So rather than building up boys into men, we're making men boys. So we have man boys running around.
Man boys.
We got a society full of man boys.
Man boys, yeah.
And these man boys are weak.
Yeah.
They can be effeminate. And I'm not bashing people. I'm not pointing my finger at people, but I'm saying that our society and our culture is elevating a weaker version of men. But when I see Colin and I talk to him about Maine, and I talk to him about the lake where we camped and all the fun stuff, he'll always say when he sees a picture of it, he's like, hey, that's where I became a man.
Yeah. And
he told himself that. I did a thing where I accomplished something and I became a man through that.
Yeah.
Think about how powerful that is.
Yeah.
And I know we didn't show Colin as much in this particular video. Some of that was intentional. I will be doing an edit. I'm working, constantly working through that edit. It's very complex. But inside that edit, I'll tell that story.
Yeah.
So that'll be released over on my Jeep YouTube channel. But if we want to build the culture we desire, we have to engage the next generation of kids.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think even going back to that, where you're saying about like raising man boys, I think.
So we need to make that a term, man boys.
Man boys. but I was sitting here thinking about like, especially like the school system and especially how you're raising Colin and you're taking him out on these things. Thinking back to my time at school, and obviously that wasn't like crazy far ago, but like it just seems like when you grow up in school, like everybody just tells you to just kind of, I don't know, just kind of sit down and just listen.
Yep.
And that has just, I don't know, I think destroyed who we are.
Well, you've taken, from culture, we have removed the critical thinking.
Yeah.
We've removed critical decision making. We've created dumb people that know how to follow basic instructions.
Yeah.
And what better way to become a slave than to not be able to freely think through problems? What better way to be completely manipulated at all times by not having enough free will or even the spine to say, hey, I'm going to do this my own way.
Mm-hmm.
That's not an arrogance thing. Like, we have to pay attention to people before us and hopefully learn some lessons so we don't get hurt or make big mistakes or whatever it might be. But at the same time, that's completely removed from our culture. The decision when there was a break-in scene inside of our video, the decision of Ethan and I to go act, I can tell you that in real life, we would have acted.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I know who we are.
Yeah.
I know what our call to protect and defend is. Does that mean we're professionals? No, it doesn't mean we're professionals. We're not professing to be these like tactical, experts.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll go do business. If we have to, we will do what we're called to do as men. And so I hope that as people saw that transition, as they saw Exodus Overland, as they saw us adventuring, that they got a craving for a piece of that. And I think influencers try to do that a lot through Overland, especially. It's a very influencer-rich environment.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
You taught me a new term on your latest YouTube video.
Oh, Broverlander? Yeah, Broverlander. Yeah.
But there's a lot of those out there. And so I think people are getting these like dopamine dumps where they're like seeing all these people doing this overlanding thing, but it's kind of in this like weird flexy kind of way. Like, oh, I've got this $100,000 Tacoma and I'm going to go camp wherever I want to, it's kind of like the van life thing where it's like this unrealistic, I don't know, painted picture of what people think they could do, but it's just not a realistic thing. We didn't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted to point people back to a natural calling to nature. And, from me looking at it, I don't know that I would have changed much because to me, again, kind of from a personal note, I solidified my relationship with my son. That's really cool. Got to spend time with you and your father. Got to spend time as a small community together for 6 days straight.
Yeah.
We got lost. We had vehicle issues, only minor ones, but we had some vehicle issues.
I think that was only you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, your vehicle issue is yours is an FJ, so it's always
fair enough. Fair enough.
But we had to navigate some things, and I think that part of this whole exercise of the Exodus companies and the launch of it is also building trust in each other, building trust in the other team members. So that was really impactful to me, and I don't think I would have changed anything because of that.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So the part that's like kind of tear jerking to me a little bit is going into Lantern.
Mm-hmm.
So Lantern is this brand that's near and dear to my heart because I know it's going to take a lot of time and it's going to be an uphill battle for us to build that brand continually. But I know that on the other side of this, just from what I know from TA Targets, building that brand up, it's going to be powerful and it's going to impact people's lives. So the 3 words that we use to describe Lantern are family, nature, tribe. And it was really neat in the voiceover section to hear that because that family, nature, tribe is what ties us back from that adventure, from the desire to go to come back.
Yeah.
So when we're looking at Lantern, in your words, in your opinion, what was the planning and the execution like of that section of the video?
Yeah. So essentially what I believe we planned out is we wanted to show a family, but we also wanted to show a community. And so how we did that essentially is obviously we filmed with your family and then we filmed with Ethan's extended family. And we just wanted to show that at the end of the day, when you come back from your job or whatever you're doing, that you come back to build what matters most. And essentially that's your family and your larger community around you. And I think we portrayed that pretty well, being able to obviously spend time with your family and just show, what happens at a campfire. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
And on top of that, we had a pretty unique opportunity that I don't think we've talked about on the podcast
Yeah,
at
we've
all.
been talked about that.
But over at Ethan's side of the family, that was pretty much their last family gathering before Ethan's father-in-law passed away. So we had an opportunity to film him with his family and give them sort of a last video, which is really impactful.
Yeah, that was.
And it really solidifies the meaning of family through that video. Now, obviously, people watching that video would not have known that.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't something that we put out, to other people, because that's a private thing in the family. But it impacted me. I know that for sure.
Yeah.
As we were making this video, it's like, man, you have to remember what's important. And it's cool to go overlanding. It's cool to shoot guns. It's cool to be free. It's cool to remove yourself from the media. But if you don't have a tangible community that you're building in some way, something you can see, then what are you building?
Yeah. And I think after that night, because that was a sombering night to film that, but we had the conversation essentially of like, what does it mean when you're gone? Like, it kind of puts into perspective that, hey, you don't even know how much time you have and what really matters. And at the end of the day, a big portion of that is family.
Yeah. And I know we talked about on the ride home, it's like every time that somebody I know passes away, when I go to their funeral, it paints a picture of who they were.
Mm-hmm.
So, going to Doug's funeral, there were probably 1,000 people there. It's crazy. Just a line that you waited for hours for the viewing. And it paints a picture of a man who built community. So as a tribute to what we're doing, that is a pure example of somebody who impacted the world around him up until his last day.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that everybody that does that's going to have a big funeral or whatever, but what I am saying is that there's a tangible result from somebody caring enough to build a community. And that's something that we all should be striving for. And I've said it in many of the podcasts so far, live a life worth telling the story of. And that doesn't mean that you have to chase having 1,000 people tell your story, but you should be pursuing a valuable story, because through that pursuit, we are going to be creating that community and that culture around us.
Yeah.
So that, when I think about it, man, I get goosebumps, because I remember hopping in the Mercedes, ripping back that night, just thinking, man, like what a gift to be able to be with their family.
Oh yeah.
That night.
Yeah.
But what a sobering experience that was.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think I'll ever forget that night.
Because people watching the video will see their family, kind of hugging each other, and it just looks like family.
Yeah.
But that was a goodbye in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy that we were able to film that.
Yeah.
And Lantern, when I look at the brand and I think about what does this brand mean? What is the purpose of this brand? It is to get people continue to get away from this fictitious manufactured jungle concrete world that we live in and experience God's gift to us, which is the world that we live in. So yes, still continue to experience it. Remove yourself from this chaotic, fake, phony existence, but now do it with your family. Build that community.
Yeah.
Build that tribe. And from my lens, I don't think I would have done anything different.
No, I agree with that. Yeah, it was very, I think it had the impact it needed to have in that section.
Yeah. I mean, also being around a fire, there's always like that, that love atmosphere, the connection. I think that, man, I don't know what humans did before fire existed.
Yeah.
Because I feel like just from a purpose standpoint, or even metaphorically, fire just represents so much stuff.
Yeah.
And it's why for the logo for Lantern, we used a flame, because fire can be a defense mechanism. It can hurt you. It can help you stay warm. It can provide for you and protect you. It can give you light in the darkness. Like, you think about fire and it's this double-edged sword.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's this existence that we have where, there's risks, and we take these risks and we gamble sometimes, but it also has the opportunity in life to provide for you. And I just, from a metaphorical standpoint, using that for this brand makes so much sense. And I hope that over the years, and as people watch this video and go through it, that when they see that section, it draws them to wanting to experience that for themselves. And I don't think that, I know everybody's upbringing is different. Some people don't have a family, so they might not have that foundational connection, but I still think that there's a call to it.
Yeah. And I think with Lantern, we also discussed, I mean, we have a social media up and running, but I know we've kind of talked about in there about that it's not just about, like, Lantern isn't just about family. It's also just about the overall community, whoever's in your local area, that you can just go out,
Physical connection.
remove distractions and just connect with people.
Yeah, physical connections with real people.
Yeah.
In a world full of artificial intelligence and people trying to replace natural human interactions with artificial. And again, we did a podcast on this because I see this as an issue. I see a red flag in our culture where we are having people hunting down these fictitious, I don't even know what you'd call them, relationships, I guess.
Yeah, like fake relationships.
With AI through dating apps and all kinds of stuff where people are so hungry for real connection that they will go to fake connection. And what we need as humans is a real, authentic relationship with the community around us. And sometimes that means we get hurt. Like, that's the irony of it. Sometimes that real, authentic relationship leads to pain.
And I think that scares people because I know there's people out there who they've been hurt before and they'll just kind of step away. And I think that's why a lot of people have fallen into that trap of, like, got a phone. There we go. That's my friend.
Yeah.
And I see how that happens.
And kind of leading out of that, coming out of Lantern, it went into chaos.
Yeah.
And I think that was probably shocking for everybody.
I've had a lot of people, even in my personal life, be like, "Oh, that ending, what happened? Like, it was so bright, and all of a sudden it was just so dark." And there was definitely a reason for that.
Yeah. So why don't you give your take on that? Why did we take, we just told this whole story. We went from start to finish through these different brands, and all of a sudden it's like everything's great, and boom.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden it's dark, but it's not just dark; it's loud, it's chaotic.
Yeah.
What's the point of that?
So one of the points, like you said, there's a lot of different meanings with the Exodus sections. But basically that you're just under attack with everything. Now we chose a lot of drug and vaccine commercials because I don't even know how we got into this conversation.
Well, quite frankly, they're the most manipulative.
Yeah.
They have some of the highest money spend of any advertisers in any industry in the world. We're one of the only countries that really allows that to happen on the pharmaceutical level. And there's just so much history of abuse.
Yeah. And we kind of wanted to show like the side effects of that because they're literally telling you what the side effects are of that. And we kind of wanted to just throw that in people's faces. Like, hey, this is what's hitting you on a daily basis, whether you know it or not. It may not be drug commercials. It may be some other form of media or some other thing that somebody's trying to sell to you. And essentially you need to stop focusing on that and leave. And that was essentially the end of the video.
And it's an intentional decision.
Yeah.
It's not accidental.
Yeah.
You're not going to just all of a sudden find yourself out of this existence. If you're one of those people that's glued to your news network and you're just depressed and you're just consuming all of their garbage, it's not just going to stop.
Yeah.
People aren't just going to start being moral with what they report on. They're not just going to start telling you the truth because they have your back. Ultimately, you have to decide, I'm going to remove myself from this and I'm going to go pursue those other things.
Yeah.
And from that video, as you followed me through the story and, I'm just the metaphorical character in that story, but as you followed this character through start to finish, it was shocking to go from like this happy family get together and all of a sudden the flame just lights up and it transitions to that dark room. And I just think that people need to let that sink in. They just need to understand that there's an intentional aspect to this. There is a decision that you make when you say you've had enough and you're going to stand up, you're going to walk towards what might even be scary. That TV, metaphorically speaking, when you hear that, it's terrifying. You hear the side effects and the risk of suicide and depression and other diseases and things like that. It's scary, but you almost have to walk towards that, turn it off, make the decision then to leave.
Yeah.
And that's the only time that you're going to start pursuing your life and also even have an ability to pursue culture.
Yeah. So it's almost as if like the whole video was just showing how you can live this happier and fuller life but at the ending, you just snap back to reality, and this is where you're at. What are you gonna do?
Yeah. There's a decision that you have to make.
Yeah.
I'm really proud of what we did.
Yeah.
I really am.
Yeah.
I really think, I know our team is.
Yeah.
You know, when we got to sit down and finally got to show the team, I was like, man, this is just
we
cool.
almost felt like this is it. Like we technically launched the Exodus companies back late November or early November.
Right before Black Friday.
Yeah. But it kind of like, up until this point, it didn't feel quite real. And then when we launched that video, it was like, okay, this is it. We knew what we wanted to do from the start, but this was like, hey, just kind of a reminder, this is what we're doing.
It's established. This has been established. And, you know, when we think about what an exodus of culture looks like, it's not a snap your fingers and done.
Yeah.
This isn't something that tomorrow we wake up and it's finished, you know? And because of that, this is a journey for us too. You know, this is a process of refinement for our team, for our communities around us. And the coolest part of this whole thing is I see a lot of symbolic resemblance between, as we're telling these stories, and what we're personally going through. Because we are also refining our team. Our team's expanding and growing. We are learning about each other and building our own community inside of where we work, which is pretty unique. I don't think many other work environments or companies are purposefully trying to build a community inside of where their occupation is.
Yeah.
You know, so I think our team was impacted by it. I obviously know that our followers were impacted by it. I know that as creators, you and I and the rest of our media team was impacted by it.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, from the creator's like standpoint, we really kind of know what we need to change for next time.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad we went through that process. Yeah, it was a long process, close to a year.
Yeah.
But we kind of through that figured out what we need to keep growing in and learning in.
And the last piece that we didn't really talk about the planning of, you gave a little bit of credit to Josh, and we got to give a lot of credit to Josh for the voiceover aspect. He didn't do the talking.
Yeah, no, yeah.
I wish he had that voice.
he didn't have the wizard voice, but
we haven't figured out how to train him in the wizard voice yet. That's like a new software update that comes later.
Yeah.
You know?
No, we just use AI, you know?
Yeah. Dude, we use AI.
I snitched.
We did not use AI in the planning of this video.
Not.
But talk a little bit about the voiceover process, because we had never.
Oh yeah.
I mean, okay, we've done voiceovers, but either I've done them or like you've done them for your own videos. Yeah. What was that like?
It was, I think it was more pressure than we probably ever had, because like we knew that this was the final thing to tie it all together, but we really didn't know, like I would say we had a plan for each section of what we wanted to talk about, but words aren't really my thing as far as like, you know, planning out what to say in a voiceover.
Yeah.
And so obviously Josh over here is a genius with words. So he typed that out. We kind of gave him what we wanted to talk about. He typed out a voiceover. We sent it off to a third party, and he came back with an amazing voiceover.
Yeah. Yeah, I was really, I don't know, like looking back, I know the voiceover wasn't easy.
Yeah.
But it felt easier than what I had thought.
Yeah.
We were putting it off. You know, we were like pushing that down the road until it was like, okay, it's time.
Yeah. Because I believe we even set the date of the launch, and we're like, oh shoot, like we didn't even finish this voiceover yet.
How long do you think it took us from start to finish? Like 2 weeks? 3
it
weeks?
wasn't long. Yeah. I think it was like maybe 2 or 3 weeks from start of writing to having a final edit.
Yeah. It's cool from the sound of the guy's voice, you know, the way he has a little bit of an accent, you know, I don't know, it just fit that video.
Yeah.
We were a little bit hesitant at first.
Well, I was just gonna say, we were hesitant because I know with today's, like, especially in the creative space, there's a lot of people that I was expecting, like, if people saw that video before they made the voiceover, they're like, oh, I don't really want to be a part of this.
Yeah.
And it was just cool because this guy was so cool. He's like, oh, that's awesome.
Oh, I see
you know
what
what I'm saying?
We're like, we had a concern. That is true. From the script, I remember when we sent it out, we're like, well, he's either going to take our money and he's going to record the script, or he's going to be like, oh man, I don't want to help these radicals. Because it's crazy, man. Like, we are viewed as radicals. Our viewpoint is very simple. We believe that humans were meant to interact with each other and build a community, a physical body of people who are looking out for each other's best interests. But we also believe that in order to even have that culture, there has to be a set at least at a foundational level, a set of ethos, of ethics.
Yeah.
We have to agree on certain things. You can't just wing it. You can't have people that say vastly different things from their own morality, but that's radical.
Yeah.
That's
I was
the
gonna say that is edgy in
it's
today's.
the grandest irony is like just a basic understanding of humanity is like, hey, that's really radical. I don't know about that guy. He's probably a domestic terrorist or something.
Yeah. It's funny when we viewed the final script, we were like, okay, like this is like seems like a good script. There's nothing like totally out there.
Yeah.
But then like before we sent it off, I was like, man, this would be edgy to most people. Like it shouldn't be, but it is.
Common sense has been removed from our culture, and what has been inserted is this manipulation of this phony culture.
Yeah.
And it is all based on the premise that when you're weaker, when you're alone, you are easier prey. Like, think about it. What predator hunts the strongest members that are in a pack?
Yeah.
You know what I
Especially
mean?
if they're all grouped up together. Yeah.
There's outliers, sure. There's animals in the wild that, yeah, they're stronger, faster, and they might pick on a big member of a group. I don't know. There's always the outlier.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, what is statistically more probable? You get picked off when you're alone, when you're weak, when you're consumed, when you're distracted, when you've taken all of your natural instincts and removed them for these weird, manipulations of culture that we have around us.
Yeah.
That's when you get picked off.
Yeah.
So how ironic that our culture finds strong, independent, but still dependent people as edgy.
Yeah.
It's ironic.
It is very ironic.
So looking at this whole thing from the bird's eye view, do you feel like we accomplished what we set out to do?
Oh, I think we did. Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
For sure.
Are you proud of what you did?
Yeah. Yeah. At first I was like, when I first watched through it, I was telling Jared, I was like, I've been in the edit so much, like I'm almost like disconnected from what the story is. But after kind of like, I think it was kind of during the launch video I watched, I was like, oh, okay. Like that's awesome. Like I'm glad.
And one of the things I like to ask you is what you feel about it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm sure you picked up on it, because sometimes you're probably like, oh no, here we go again.
Yeah.
But when we're reviewing content with Brenton, I like to ask him after I've watched it, what were your thoughts on that? Because I know from a creator standpoint, we're often very hard on ourselves when we're trying to tell a story.
Yeah.
And we often will not necessarily give each other credit until somebody will come up and like almost force us to, you know what I mean? Be like, hey, that's pretty good.
And it's also like that imposter syndrome aspect where like I feel like I should have like the skill set and everything to be able to just do something epic. And then you're like, oh, well, I'm only a few years into videography. So I'm like very young.
Yeah.
Compared to.
Well, and people. Everybody around us knows the simple fact that we have all the coolest camera gear and we've got 15 people behind the scenes.
Yeah. Yep.
Actually, we had Brenton running around with a Canon R6.
Uh-huh.
And what do we have? An RS2 gimbal? Is that what?
RS2.
RS2. And basically an Aperture 300D, the Goddix.
Yeah.
Which is an 80 something. I don't even know.
80. Did we even have that then? Yeah, we did.
Yeah, we did. So I guess what I'm saying is hopefully that comforts some people that are creators that watch our stuff, because we were running around with like basic equipment.
Yeah, we did this, I would say, with very little.
Yeah.
We had some tube lights and that was essentially it.
Nan lights.
Yeah, Nan lights.
I'm so happy for those.
Yeah.
Hey, look, I see one behind you. So there is an aspect of having the right gear does help, but I feel like because of the way we went at it, the mentality that we had this year, because we took the time to plan at least a basic idea of what we wanted to see, and we knew what our mission was. I think that's the biggest thing. Biggest thing I want to leave people with before we end this podcast here is we might not have known every step of the video. We may not have known exactly what shot we needed when, but we understood that there's a story that needed to be told. We knew the basic layout of that story. And the craziest thing that happens as you're telling the story is sometimes the pieces just fall into place.
Yeah.
You find out that the thing that you got that was some random shot that you wouldn't have thought you would use ends up being the perfect shot for that moment.
Yeah. Yeah, you almost just have to go do it. Just do something. And that's something we talk a lot about in our meetings. Just make a step.
Well, let's leave that. Let's leave people with that tonight. So when you feel like it's inadequate, or when you feel like you're inadequate, when you feel like you don't have enough, when you feel like maybe you don't know the next step, maybe you want to build a community, maybe you want to have the things that we discussed, you want to be able to provide to protect the people around you, and also even lead, to be able to be a leader that calls people together. we would just encourage you to take that first step, because ultimately nobody else is going to take that step for you. That's a decision that you have to make on your own. Nobody will make the decision for you to become the better version of yourself. You have to make that decision. And ultimately, our culture is hungry for people that make those intentional steps towards being better, pursuing excellence, but being capable of building communities. Our culture around us wants us to be weak. They want us to be alone. They want us to be easily manipulated. Our objective has to be to build a stronghold of culture, because if we do not build a stronghold of culture, ultimately everything that we believe in, all our morality, our values, and everything that we've been fighting for since the foundation of our country will be at risk. So ultimately, it's a decision you have to make. Only you can make it. And we hope that through what we do here at the podcast, we can encourage you guys to make those steps to build a better culture. Thank you for listening to the Exodus Companies podcast. Consider supporting us by paying this episode forward. Share this episode with your friends and family. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow our social media pages. Subscribe to our newsletter for inside information, pre-released blogs, and much more. And consider our apparel so you can support what we do. And in return, our apparel will help you speak values and truth in the world around you. Join the Exodus. We will see you in the next episode.